My sister tried to punish me at my husband's party after we announced my pregnancy, but it backfired horribly, and now she's facing jail time and divorce. Emily and I had always had a complicated relationship. Growing up, we were close in the way that sisters often are, sharing secrets, clothes, and dreams about the future. But as we got older, the gap between us widened, and our bond became strained. I found my path, married a wonderful man, started a successful career, and built a life I was proud of, while Emily seemed to struggle at every turn. Her marriage to Ben, a man she once adored, was now on the rocks, and her career had stalled out, leaving her feeling resentful and stuck. I tried to be there for her, but it always felt like my success was a sore spot for her. Every promotion I got, every milestone Tom and I celebrated, seemed to deepen the rift between us. It wasn't that Emily was openly hostile. No, she was too subtle for that. But there were always those little comments, those sideways glances that made it clear she wasn't happy for me. The tension between us reached a breaking point at the party Tom and I hosted to celebrate our 5th wedding anniversary. It was meant to be a joyous occasion, a night filled with friends, laughter, and a special announcement that we'd been keeping under wraps. I was 3 months pregnant, and Tom and I couldn't wait to share the news with everyone we loved. We decided to tell everyone at the party, imagining the looks of joy and excitement on their faces as we revealed our secret. As the guests began to arrive, the house buzzed with energy. Tom and I had gone all out, decorating the place with candles, flowers, and photos from our wedding day. The kitchen was filled with the aroma of delicious food, and the sound of music and laughter echoed through the halls. I was nervous but excited, knowing that in just a few hours everyone would know our happy news. Emily arrived late as usual. She walked in with a tight smile, her eyes scanning the room before settling on me. "Sorry I'm late," she said, handing me a bottle of wine. "Traffic was a nightmare." "Don't worry about it," I said, trying to keep things light. "I'm just glad you made it." She nodded, her eyes flicking to Tom, who was busy chatting with some friends in the corner. "Nice setup. You guys always do things so perfectly." There it was, that familiar edge in her voice. I ignored it, focusing instead on mingling with our guests. But as the night wore on, I couldn't help but notice the way Emily seemed to be hovering near the bar, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. When the time finally came to make our announcement, Tom and I gathered everyone in the living room. The excitement in the air was palpable as we stood in front of our friends and family, holding hands and grinning like school kids. "We have some news to share," Tom began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "We're expecting a baby." The room erupted in cheers and applause. Friends rushed forward to congratulate us, and my parents, who had been in on the secret, beamed with pride. I looked around the room, soaking in the joy and excitement, until my eyes landed on Emily. She was standing at the edge of the crowd, her expression frozen in a strained smile. For a moment I thought I saw something flicker in her eyes, anger, jealousy, something dark, but it was gone before I could be sure. She walked over and hugged me, her arms stiff around my shoulders. "Congratulations," she said, her voice tight. "That's wonderful news." "Thanks, Emily," I replied, though something about her tone made me uneasy. I tried to shake it off, telling myself that she was just surprised and maybe a little overwhelmed. As the party continued, I noticed Emily retreating to the bar more frequently. She was drinking more than usual, her eyes narrowing as she watched me interact with the guests. I told myself that she was just dealing with her own issues, that it had nothing to do with me. But the unease in my stomach grew, especially when I saw her talking in hushed tones with a few people, casting glances my way. I was about to head over and check on her when Tom pulled me aside, his eyes shining with happiness. "You okay, babe?" he asked, wrapping an arm around my waist. "You've been a little quiet." "Yeah, I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile. "Just trying to take it all in. This is such a big moment." He kissed me on the forehead, his warmth and love soothing the anxiety that had been gnawing at me all night. "You're amazing. You know that. I'm so lucky to have you." I leaned into him, feeling a surge of gratitude for the life we were building together. "I'm the lucky one," I whispered, and for a moment everything felt perfect. But that perfection was short-lived. As the evening wore on, I found myself growing more and more fatigued. It was an odd feeling, heavy, dizzy, and slightly nauseous. At first, I chalked it up to the excitement and the pregnancy, but as the symptoms worsened, I knew something wasn't right. I excused myself from a conversation and headed to the bathroom, hoping that some fresh air and a splash of cold water would help. But by the time I reached the door, my vision was blurring, and my legs felt like they were about to give out. I gripped the doorframe, trying to steady myself, but the dizziness only intensified. "Are you okay?" a voice asked from behind me, but it sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. I turned to see Emily standing there, her face a mask of concern, but something in her eyes made my skin crawl. There was a coldness, a detachment that I couldn't quite understand. "I don't feel so good," I mumbled, my words slurring as the room spun around me. Before I could say anything else, the world went dark. I don't know how long I was out, but when I came to, I was lying on the floor, surrounded by panicked faces. Tom was kneeling beside me, his face pale with fear. "Call an ambulance!" He was shouting to someone in the crowd. "She's pregnant, for God's sake!" I tried to speak, to tell him that I was okay, but the words wouldn't come. My body felt heavy, like it was being weighed down by invisible chains, and the dizziness was still there, making everything around me blur and warp. "Just hold on, honey," Tom whispered, his voice trembling as he stroked my hair. "Help is on the way. Just hold on." The next few minutes were a chaotic blur of voices, flashing lights, and the sound of sirens. I was barely conscious as they lifted me onto a stretcher, but I could feel Tom's hand gripping mine, his voice soothing me as they wheeled me out of the house and into the ambulance. As we sped toward the hospital, a terrifying thought pierced through the fog in my mind. What if something was wrong with the baby? The thought filled me with a cold dread, and I tried to focus on staying awake, on holding on to the faint hope that everything would be okay. But as I slipped in and out of consciousness, one image kept flashing in my mind. Emily, standing there with that strange, unreadable expression on her face. What had she done? The hospital room was cold and sterile, the fluorescent lights casting a harsh glow over everything. I was lying in a bed, hooked up to machines that beeped and hummed in a rhythmic chorus. My head was pounding, and my body felt like it had been hit by a truck. But all I could think about was the baby. Tom was beside me, his face etched with worry as he held my hand. He hadn't left my side since we arrived, and the fear in his eyes only deepened the knot of anxiety in my stomach. "Tom," I croaked, my voice weak. "The baby. Is the baby okay?" He squeezed my hand, his eyes welling up with tears. "The doctors said the baby's okay," he reassured me, his voice cracking with emotion. "They ran some tests, and they're monitoring everything closely, but they think you and the baby are going to be fine." Relief washed over me, and I closed my eyes, letting out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. But even as I felt that momentary peace, the memory of Emily's face, her cold, detached expression, crept back into my mind. "What happened to me?" I asked, my voice still shaky. "Why did I pass out like that?" Tom's expression darkened, and he hesitated for a moment before answering. "The doctors think you were drugged," he said quietly. "They found traces of a substance in your system that wasn't supposed to be there." My heart skipped a beat. "Drugged? How? By who?" "Emily," I whispered, the realization hitting me like a ton of bricks. It was Emily. I remember feeling strange after I drank something she handed me. Tom's grip on my hand tightened, his jaw clenching as he fought to keep his composure. I thought the same thing, but I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think that your own sister would do something like this. "But why?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why would she do this to me?" Tom shook his head, his eyes filled with a mix of anger and confusion. "I don't know, but the police are investigating. They took a statement from me, and they'll want to talk to you too once you're feeling up to it." The thought of the police being involved made everything feel even more surreal. I couldn't wrap my head around it. My own sister, someone I had loved and trusted, had drugged me at my own party. The betrayal was too much to process, and I felt tears welling up in my eyes. "I can't believe she would do this," I said, my voice trembling. "I know things have been tense between us, but this This is beyond anything I ever imagined." Tom leaned in closer, his expression softening as he wiped away a tear that had slipped down my cheek. "We're going to get through this," he said gently. "Right now you need to focus on getting better for you and the baby. The police will handle the rest." I nodded, but the weight of everything that had happened hung heavy over me. How could things have gone so wrong? How had our relationship deteriorated to the point where Emily would do something so reckless, so dangerous? The next few days in the hospital were a blur of tests, doctor visits, and endless questions from the police. They were thorough, asking about every detail of the party, my relationship with Emily, and anything that might explain why she would do something so terrible. I answered as best I could, but my mind was still foggy, and I struggled to piece together the events of that night. Tom was my rock through it all, staying by my side and handling everything with the doctors and the police. I could see the strain this was putting on him, but he never let it show when he was with me. He was determined to protect me, to make sure that I didn't have to bear this burden alone. It wasn't long before the police called Tom back to the station for another round of questioning, and I was left alone in the hospital room, staring up at the ceiling as the weight of everything pressed down on me. I tried to focus on the baby, on the life growing inside me, as a way to ground myself in the chaos. But my thoughts kept drifting back to Emily. What could have driven her to do something so horrific? Jealousy? Anger? Or was it something deeper, something that had been festering for years? The police had told me that Emily was under investigation and that there would be serious consequences if they found enough evidence to prove she had drugged me. The thought of my sister facing jail time made my stomach churn, but I knew I couldn't let that cloud my judgment. She had put my life, and the life of my baby, in danger. There had to be consequences. A day later, I was finally discharged from the hospital. The doctors were confident that both the baby and I were going to be okay, but they urged me to take it easy, to rest as much as possible. Tom and I headed home, but our house, once a place of warmth and comfort, now felt tainted by what had happened. When we walked through the door, I was overwhelmed by the memories of the party, of the announcement, and of the moment everything had gone so horribly wrong. I sat down on the couch, feeling the tears well up again as the reality of it all hit me like a wave. Tom sat beside me, pulling me into his arms. "I know it's hard," he said softly, "but we're going to get through this. We have to stay strong, for each other and for our baby." I nodded, leaning into him, grateful for his strength. "I just can't stop thinking about Emily," I admitted. "I keep wondering what she was thinking, what she was trying to accomplish." "She was trying to hurt you," Tom said, his voice laced with anger. "And she did. But she didn't succeed in the way she wanted to. She didn't ruin everything." A few days later, I received a call from the police, asking me to come down to the station to discuss the case. My heart pounded as I listened to the officer's voice, knowing that this could be the moment where everything became real, where Emily's actions would have real, tangible consequences. Tom insisted on coming with me, and I was grateful for his support. As we sat in the police station waiting to be called in, my mind raced with 1,000 different thoughts. What would they tell me? Had they found enough evidence to charge Emily? What would happen to her if they did? Finally, a detective came out to meet us, leading us into a small, dimly lit room. He was a middle-aged man with kind eyes, but his expression was serious as he sat down across from us. "Thank you for coming in," he began, glancing down at the file in front of him. "I wanted to update you on the investigation into your sister's actions." I swallowed hard, nodding for him to continue. "Based on the evidence we've gathered and the statements we've taken from witnesses at the party, we believe we have enough to charge your sister with assault and reckless endangerment," he said. "The substance she used could have caused serious harm to both you and your unborn child. It's a very serious offence, and she will likely face significant legal consequences." The words hit me like a ton of bricks, and I felt the air leave my lungs. This was real. Emily was going to be charged, and she could end up in jail for what she'd done. I had known this was a possibility, but hearing it confirmed was still a shock. Tom reached over and squeezed my hand, his expression tense. "What happens now?" he asked the detective. "We'll be arresting her soon," the detective replied. She'll have to go through the legal process, and it will be up to the courts to determine her fate. But given the severity of the charges, it's likely she'll face jail time. I nodded, struggling to process everything. My sister, the person I had grown up with, shared my childhood with, was facing jail time for trying to harm me. It was surreal, like something out of a nightmare. As we left the station, I felt numb, my mind unable to fully grasp the gravity of the situation. Tom was quiet beside me, his jaw clenched as he tried to keep his emotions in check. When we got home, I collapsed onto the couch, feeling completely drained. Tom sat beside me, his hand resting on my knee as we sat in silence. I don't know how to feel, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm angry, I'm hurt, but I'm also sad. I never wanted this to happen. I know, Tom said, his voice soft, but she made her choices, and now she has to face the consequences. You did nothing wrong. I know that, I said, though the words felt hollow, but it doesn't make it any easier. In the days that followed, news of Emily's arrest spread quickly through our family and social circle. Everyone was shocked, unable to believe that she could do something so terrible. My parents were devastated, struggling to come to terms with the fact that one daughter had nearly destroyed the other. They called me often, checking in to make sure I was okay, but I could hear the pain in their voices, the pain of knowing that their family was falling apart. But as much as I wanted to be there for them, I couldn't bring myself to face them. Not yet. I needed time to process everything, to figure out how to move forward. The idea of seeing my parents and discussing what had happened was too overwhelming, so I kept my distance, focusing on my own recovery and the safety of my baby. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I received a call from Ben, Emily's husband. "Can we meet?" he asked, his voice strained. "There are some things we need to talk about." I hesitated, my mind racing. I hadn't spoken to Ben since the party, and I wasn't sure I was ready to hear what he had to say. But something in his voice told me that this was important, that he was struggling just as much as I was. "Okay," I agreed. "We can meet." We arranged to meet at a coffee shop near my house. When I arrived, I found Ben sitting at a table in the corner, his shoulders slumped and his face etched with exhaustion. He looked up as I approached, his eyes red and bloodshot. "Thanks for meeting me," he said, his voice hoarse. "I didn't know who else to talk to." I sat down across from him, feeling a mix of emotions, anger, pity, confusion. "What's going on, Ben?" I asked, my tone gentle. He ran a hand through his hair, sighing deeply. "I don't even know where to start. Emily, I knew things were bad between us, but I never imagined she would do something like this. I'm filing for divorce." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with finality. I wasn't surprised, not really, but hearing it still felt like another blow. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, I knew that Ben didn't deserve this. "I can't imagine what you're going through." He nodded, his eyes filled with pain. "I feel like my whole life is falling apart. I've known for a while that our marriage was in trouble, but I thought we could work through it. I don't know what I thought, but after what she did to you, I can't stay with her. I can't trust her anymore." "I understand," I said quietly, my heart aching for both of us. We were both victims of Emily's actions, both left to pick up the pieces of our shattered lives. I needed to talk to someone who understands," Ben continued, his voice breaking. "I know you're going through hell right now, but I don't know who else to turn to. My life feels like it's been ripped apart and I don't know how to put it back together." I reached across the table, taking his hand in mine. "We'll figure it out," I said, my voice filled with resolve. "We'll find a way to move forward, to heal. It's not going to be easy, but we can't let this destroy us." Ben nodded, squeezing my hand in gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered. "I know this isn't easy for you either." We talked for a while longer, sharing our fears, our doubts, and our hopes for the future. It was a painful conversation, but it was also cathartic. For the first time since the incident, I felt like I wasn't alone in my pain, like there was someone else who understood the depth of the betrayal we had both experienced. As we said our goodbyes, I felt a sense of closure, as if a chapter of my life was finally coming to an end. Emily had made her choices, and now she would have to face the consequences, both legally and personally. Her marriage was over, and she was likely facing jail time. It was a harsh reality, but it was one that she had brought upon herself. Back at home, I found Tom waiting for me, his eyes filled with concern. "How did it go?" he asked as I walked through the door. "It was hard," I admitted, sinking into his embrace. "But I think I needed it. Ben's filing for divorce." Tom nodded, holding me close. "I'm sorry, I know this is all so much to handle." "It is," I said, my voice muffled against his chest, "but I'm starting to see a way through it. We're going to be okay, Tom. We have to be." "We will be," he agreed, his voice steady and reassuring. "No matter what, we'll get through this together." As I looked up at him, I felt a sense of peace that had been missing for so long. The storm that had torn through our lives was finally beginning to subside, and I could see the first glimpses of a brighter future. The weeks that followed were a time of healing. The legal proceedings against Emily moved forward, and I did my best to distance myself from the chaos. I focused on my pregnancy, on preparing for the arrival of our baby, and on rebuilding my life with Tom. It wasn't easy, and there were days when the weight of everything felt too heavy to bear, but I kept moving forward, one step at a time. Emily's trial was a painful ordeal, one that I chose to attend only when necessary. I couldn't bring myself to sit through every detail, to relive the nightmare of that night over and over again. But when the day of her sentencing finally came, I knew I had to be there, to face her, to see the final chapter of this story come to an end. The courtroom was cold and imposing, the air thick with tension as the judge read out the verdict. Emily was sentenced to several years in prison for assault and reckless endangerment, a punishment that would likely haunt her for the rest of her life. As the gavel came down, signalling the end of the trial, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and a lingering sense of disbelief. This was the final consequence of her actions, the end of the road for the sister I had once loved and trusted. After the sentencing, I walked out of the courtroom, my heart heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. But as I stepped into the sunlight, I felt a sense of closure, as if a chapter of my life had finally come to an end. Tom was waiting for me outside, his eyes filled with concern as he wrapped his arms around me. "How are you feeling?" he asked gently. "I'm okay," I said, leaning into his embrace. "It's over. It's finally over." As we walked to the car, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I knew that I had the strength to face whatever came next. I had survived the storm, and now it was time to rebuild, to focus on the future, and to create a life filled with love and happiness for myself, Tom, and our baby. In the months that followed, life slowly began to return to normal. Tom and I moved forward, focusing on our growing family and the new chapter we were about to begin. The pain of the past was still there, but it was beginning to fade, replaced by a sense of hope and renewal. When our baby was finally born, I held them in my arms, feeling a wave of love and gratitude wash over me. This was the future I had fought for, the life I had worked so hard to protect, and as I looked into my child's eyes, I knew that everything we had been through had led us to this moment. Tom and I named our baby Grace, a reminder of the strength, resilience, and love that had carried us through the darkest of times. As we held her close, we knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together as a family. And in that moment, I felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that we had come through the fire stronger than ever, ready to embrace the future with open hearts and unwavering hope. The days following Emily's arrest were some of the most challenging of my life. The news of what she had done spread quickly among our family and friends, and the reactions were a mix of shock, disbelief, and sorrow. My parents were particularly devastated, torn between their love for both of their daughters and the horror of what Emily had done. The once tight-knit family that I had grown up in now felt fractured, as if a bomb had gone off and left us all reeling in the aftermath. I spent most of my time at home, trying to focus on my pregnancy and my health, but the emotional toll was undeniable. The house, once filled with the joyful anticipation of our growing family, now felt heavy with the weight of betrayal and loss. Tom did his best to keep things as normal as possible, but I could see the strain in his eyes too. This was affecting him deeply, and it broke my heart to see the man I loved so worried and burdened by everything that had happened. One evening, after a particularly long day filled with legal paperwork and difficult conversations with my parents, Tom sat me down in the living room. The fire crackled in the fireplace, casting a warm glow over the room, but it did little to ease the chill that had settled over my heart. "We need to talk about what happens next," Tom said gently, taking my hand in his. "This isn't something that's just going to go away. We have to figure out how to move forward." I nodded, knowing he was right, but the thought of moving forward felt impossible, like trying to wade through quicksand. "I just don't know how to move on from this, Tom," I admitted, my voice trembling. "How do I move on when my own sister tried to hurt me, tried to hurt our baby?" Tom squeezed my hand, his eyes filled with love and determination. "We move on by focusing on what's most important. Our family. You, me, and this little one," he said, placing a hand on my growing belly. "We can't let what Emily did define the rest of our lives. We have to find a way to heal and build the future we want for our child." Tears welled up in my eyes as I listened to his words, but they were tears of gratitude. Tom was right. We couldn't let Emily's actions overshadow the love and happiness we had worked so hard to build. We had to find a way to move forward, for ourselves and for our baby. "I'm just so angry, Tom," I confessed, my voice breaking. Angry at Emily for what she did, and angry at myself for not seeing it coming. I keep thinking back to all those little moments, all the signs that something was wrong, and I hate myself for not realizing what she was capable of. Tom wrapped his arms around me, pulling me close. "This isn't your fault," he whispered, his voice steady and reassuring. "You couldn't have known what she was planning. You trusted her because she was your sister, and there's no shame in that. But now it's time to let go of that guilt and focus on what's ahead." I nodded against his chest, feeling a small measure of comfort in his embrace. I knew he was right, but letting go of the guilt and anger was easier said than done. Still, I knew I had to try, for the sake of our baby and for the future we were building together. The next day I received a call from my parents. They had been keeping their distance since Emily's arrest, struggling to come to terms with what had happened. But I knew that they needed to talk, to try to make sense of the chaos that had torn our family apart. "Can we come over?" my mother asked, her voice tentative and filled with emotion. "We need to see you. We need to talk about everything." I hesitated, knowing that this conversation would be difficult, but I also knew that it was necessary. We couldn't keep avoiding each other, pretending that everything was fine when it was anything but. "Okay," I agreed. "Come over tonight." When my parents arrived, the tension was palpable. My mother's eyes were red and puffy from crying, and my father's face was drawn with exhaustion. They looked older than I had ever seen them, as if the weight of what had happened had aged them overnight. We sat down in the living room, the silence thick and uncomfortable. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice trembling with emotion. "We're so sorry, sweetheart. We're so sorry for what Emily did. We can't understand how she could do something so terrible." "I can't either," I replied, my voice tight with the effort to hold back tears. "But she did, and now we all have to live with the consequences." My father nodded, his expression grave. "We know that what she did was unforgivable, and she'll have to face the legal consequences. But she's still our daughter, and this is breaking our hearts. We don't know what to do, how to move forward from this." I felt a pang of sympathy for them, knowing that they were caught in an impossible situation, torn between their love for me and their love for Emily. But at the same time, I couldn't forget the pain she had caused, the fear I had felt when I collapsed at the party, and the terror of thinking that something might happen to my baby. "I understand that you're hurting too," I said, my voice softening. "But I need you to understand that I can't just move past this. I need time to heal, to process everything. I can't be around her right now, and I need you to respect that." My mother nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. We do respect that, honey. We don't expect you to forgive her, and we're not asking you to. We just want you to know that we're here for you, that we love you, and that we'll support you in whatever you need. My father reached out and took my hand, his grip firm and steady. We'll do whatever it takes to help you heal, to help you and Tom move forward. We just don't want to lose our family. We don't want this to destroy us. The sincerity in their voices touched me, and I felt a small measure of the anger and resentment I had been holding on to begin to melt away. I knew that my parents were suffering too, and that they were doing their best to navigate this impossible situation. I don't want this to destroy our family either, I said, my voice trembling, but I need space. I need time to figure out how to move forward, and I need you to support me in that. We will, my mother promised, her voice thick with emotion. We'll give you all the space you need, and when you're ready, we'll be here, waiting. The conversation with my parents, while painful, was a step toward healing. I knew that it would take time to rebuild our relationship, to find a new normal after everything that had happened, but I also knew that they were committed to being there for me, to helping me through this dark time. As the weeks went on, I continued to focus on my pregnancy and my health. Tom and I attended prenatal classes, decorated the nursery, and prepared ourselves for the arrival of our baby. It was a bittersweet time, filled with moments of joy and anticipation, but also tinged with the sadness of knowing that my relationship with Emily had been shattered beyond repair. The trial date loomed closer, and with it, the reality of what Emily had done became harder to ignore. I had tried to distance myself from the legal proceedings as much as possible, but I knew that I would have to face her in court, to relive the events of that night and testify to the pain and fear she had caused. The night before the trial, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, my mind racing with thoughts of what the next day would bring. Tom lay beside me, his breathing slow and steady. But I knew he was awake too, silently worrying about what the trial would mean for us, for our family. I'm scared, I whispered into the darkness, my voice trembling. I'm scared of facing her, of seeing her again. Tom turned to me, his eyes soft with concern. You don't have to do this alone, he said, taking my hand in his. I'll be right there with you, every step of the way, and no matter what happens, we'll get through this together. His words gave me the strength I needed, and the next morning we walked into the courthouse hand in hand, ready to face whatever was to come. The courtroom was cold and sterile, the air thick with tension as the trial began. I sat beside Tom, my heart pounding in my chest as the proceedings unfolded. Emily was there, sitting with her lawyer, her face pale and drawn. She looked so different from the sister I had known, so small, so vulnerable, and yet I couldn't forget the darkness that had led her to do what she had done. When it was time for me to testify, I stood up on shaky legs, my palms sweating as I walked to the witness stand. I could feel Emily's eyes on me, but I didn't look at her. I couldn't. The prosecutor began by asking me to recount the events of the party, the announcement, the moment I began to feel ill, and the fear I felt as I realized something was horribly wrong. My voice trembled as I spoke, but I forced myself to stay composed, to get through it. As I described the moment I collapsed, I felt the tears begin to well up, but I blinked them back, refusing to let them fall. I had to be strong. I had to show the court and Emily that I wasn't broken by what had happened. Finally, the prosecutor asked me the question I had been dreading. Do you believe that your sister Emily deliberately drugged you that night? I hesitated, the weight of the question pressing down on me. But I knew the answer. I knew it in my heart, even if it hurt to say it out loud. Yes, I said, my voice steady despite the tears that threatened to spill over. I believe she did. The courtroom fell silent, the weight of my words hanging in the air. I could feel the tension in the room, the disbelief and sadness of everyone who had known Emily, who had loved her, but I couldn't let that sway me. I had to speak the truth, no matter how painful it was. As I stepped down from the witness stand, I finally allowed myself to glance at Emily. She was staring down at her hands, her expression unreadable. For a moment I felt a pang of sadness, a flicker of the bond we had once shared. But it was quickly replaced by the memory of what she had done, of the danger she had put me and my baby in. The rest of the trial passed in a blur, and before I knew it, the judge was reading out the verdict. Emily was found guilty of assault and reckless endangerment, and she was sentenced to several years in prison. The gavel came down with a finality that echoed through the courtroom, signalling the end of the trial and the beginning of the next chapter of my life. As we left the courthouse, I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief that it was over, sadness for what had been lost, and a lingering sense of disbelief that my own sister was going to prison for trying to harm me. Tom wrapped his arm around me as we walked to the car, his presence a comforting anchor in the storm of emotions swirling inside me. "It's over," he said softly. "You did it. You got through it." "I did," I replied, my voice filled with a quiet determination. "And now we can finally move on." The weeks that followed the trial were a time of healing, both physically and emotionally. I focused on my pregnancy, on preparing for the arrival of our baby, and on rebuilding my life with Tom. It wasn't easy, and there were still moments when the pain of what had happened would catch me off guard, but I was determined to move forward, to find peace in the life we were creating together. When our baby was finally born, it was the most beautiful moment of my life. As I held our daughter in my arms, I felt a wave of love and gratitude wash over me. This was the future I had fought for, the life I had worked so hard to protect. We named her Grace, a symbol of the strength, resilience, and love that had carried us through the darkest of times. As Tom and I held her close, we knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together as a family. The pain of the past would always be there, a scar that would never fully fade, but it no longer defined us. We had come through the fire, stronger and more united than ever, and we were ready to embrace the future with open hearts and unwavering hope. The weeks after Grace's birth were a whirlwind of sleepless nights, endless feedings, and a joy so deep it almost hurt. Holding my daughter in my arms, feeling the softness of her tiny body against mine, made everything else fade into the background. The pain, the betrayal, the trial, it all seemed distant, like something that had happened to someone else. All that mattered now was this little life we had brought into the world, the life Tom and I had fought so hard to protect. Grace was the light that guided us through the darkness. Every time I looked into her wide, innocent eyes, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for so long. She was perfect, and she was ours. I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we could face them together. But even as I cherished these precious moments with my daughter, I knew that the scars of the past hadn't fully healed. The trial might have been over, but the emotional wounds were still raw, and I couldn't help but think about Emily, alone in a prison cell, facing the consequences of her actions. Part of me wanted to hate her, to shut her out of my life completely, but another part of me, the part that remembered the sister I had once loved, still ached for her. Tom was my rock during those early days of motherhood. He was everything I needed him to be, strong, supportive, and endlessly patient. He took care of the things I couldn't handle, managing the household, fielding calls from family, and making sure I had everything I needed to focus on Grace. Watching him with our daughter, seeing the love in his eyes as he held her, made me fall in love with him all over again. Despite everything, we had created something beautiful together, and I knew that nothing could ever take that away from us. One afternoon, as Grace napped peacefully in her crib, Tom and I sat together on the couch, savouring a rare moment of quiet. The house was filled with the warm golden light of a late autumn day, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a sense of calm. "You know, I've been thinking," Tom said, breaking the silence, "about Emily." I looked at him, surprised. We hadn't talked much about Emily since the trial, both of us focusing on moving forward rather than dwelling on the past. "What about her?" I asked, my heart tightening at the thought of my sister. "She's going to be in prison for a long time," Tom said carefully, "and I know she did something unforgivable, but she's still your sister. I can't imagine how hard that must be for you." I nodded, swallowing the lump that had formed in my throat. "It is hard," I admitted. I've been trying not to think about her, but it's impossible. Every time I look at Grace, I think about how she almost didn't make it, how close we came to losing her because of what Emily did. But at the same time, I can't just stop caring about her. I hate what she did, but I don't know if I can hate her. Tom took my hand, his thumb gently stroking the back of it. You don't have to decide how you feel about her right now, he said softly. It's okay to have mixed feelings. What she did was terrible, but that doesn't erase all the years you shared before this. You're allowed to feel conflicted. Tears welled up in my eyes as I listened to his words. Tom always knew exactly what to say, how to make sense of the emotions swirling inside me. I just don't know if I can ever forgive her, I said, my voice breaking. How do you forgive someone for trying to hurt you? For putting your child in danger? Tom sighed, his expression thoughtful. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing what she did, he said. It's about finding peace for yourself, about not letting the anger and hurt control your life. Maybe it's something you'll never be able to do, and that's okay too. But if you ever feel ready to talk to her, to try to understand why she did what she did, I'll support you. His words hung in the air between us, and I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the man I had married. Tom had been through so much, but he never let his own pain overshadow his love for me and our daughter. He was willing to stand by me, no matter what I decided, and that gave me the strength to face whatever lay ahead. A few days later, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Emily, written in neat, familiar handwriting that sent a jolt of emotion through me as soon as I saw it. I hesitated before opening it, my heart pounding in my chest. Part of me wanted to tear it up, to throw it away without reading it. But another part of me, the part that still longed for the sister I had once known, couldn't resist. I sat down at the kitchen table, the letter trembling in my hands as I unfolded it. The words blurred before my eyes as I read, the emotions too overwhelming to process all at once. Dear Your Name, I know this letter might be the last thing you want to receive, but I need to say these things, even if you never read them. I've had a lot of time to think since the trial, and I can't even begin to express how sorry I am for what I did. I've tried to come up with an explanation, a reason for my actions, but the truth is, there's no excuse. I let my jealousy and bitterness consume me, and I did something unforgivable. I know I've lost your trust, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I'm going to spend the rest of my life living with the consequences of my actions, and I'm ready to accept whatever punishment comes my way. But more than anything, I want you to know that I never meant to hurt you like this. I was so wrapped up in my own misery that I couldn't see how much I was destroying everything around me. If you never want to see me again, I understand. But if you ever find it in your heart to talk to me, to try to understand what happened, I'll be here, waiting. I've lost so much because of my actions, and the thought of losing you forever is the hardest thing to bear. Please take care of yourself, and take care of that beautiful baby girl. She's lucky to have you as her mother. Love, Emily. I finished reading the letter, tears streaming down my face. The words were raw, filled with regret and pain, and I could feel the weight of Emily's sorrow in every line. I had no idea what to do with this letter, how to respond to the emotions it stirred within me. Tom found me sitting at the table, the letter still clutched in my hand. He didn't say anything at first, just wrapped his arms around me, letting me cry against his chest. "What does she say?" he asked softly after a while. "She's sorry," I whispered, my voice choked with emotion. "She says she never meant to hurt me, that she was consumed by her own misery." Tom nodded, holding me tighter. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I admitted, the uncertainty weighing heavily on me. Part of me wants to throw this letter away and never think about her again, but another part of me, I don't know, Tom. I still care about her, even after everything. He kissed the top of my head, his voice gentle. "You don't have to decide anything right now. Take your time. Whatever you choose to do, I'll be here for you." I nodded, grateful for his support, but the decision weighed heavily on me in the days that followed. Emily's letter had reopened old wounds, bringing all the pain and confusion back to the surface. I couldn't stop thinking about her, about the sister I had grown up with, and the bond we had once shared. Could I really just walk away from her forever? Or was there a way to find some sort of closure, even if forgiveness wasn't possible? One evening, as I rocked Grace to sleep, I found myself talking to her, whispering my thoughts and fears into the quiet of the nursery. "What should I do, sweetheart?" I asked, my voice trembling. "How do I move forward from this? How do I make peace with everything that's happened?" Grace, of course, didn't answer. She just snuggled closer to me, her tiny hand clutching my shirt as she drifted off to sleep. But in that moment, I felt a sense of clarity, a realization that had been slowly building inside me since I received Emily's letter. I couldn't forget what Emily had done, and I wasn't sure if I could ever fully forgive her. But I also couldn't ignore the fact that she was my sister, that she was suffering, and that a part of me still cared about her, despite everything. Maybe we would never be close again. Maybe the trust between us was shattered beyond repair, but I couldn't let the anger and resentment consume me any longer. The next day, I wrote back to Emily. I kept my letter brief, telling her that I had received her message and that I needed time to process everything. I didn't offer forgiveness, but I didn't shut her out either. I simply told her that I was focusing on my family, on healing, and that I hoped she could find a way to do the same. Sending that letter was one of the hardest things I'd ever done, but it also brought a sense of relief, a feeling that I was finally taking control of my own healing process. I didn't know what the future held for my relationship with Emily, but I knew that I was ready to start letting go of the pain, to focus on the life Tom and I were building with Grace. As the weeks turned into months, the pain of the past began to fade, replaced by the joy and wonder of raising our daughter. Grace was growing every day, her laughter filling our home with a happiness that I hadn't known was possible. She was our light, our reason for moving forward, and with every milestone she reached, I felt a little more of the weight lift from my shoulders. Tom and I found a new rhythm, a new normal that was centered around our love for each other and for Grace. We talked about the future, about the life we wanted to create for our daughter, and the pain of the past no longer felt like an anchor holding us back. It was a part of our story, but it wasn't the whole story. We had survived the storm, and we were stronger for it. One evening, as I sat in the nursery, watching Grace sleep, Tom came in and wrapped his arms around me. "She's perfect," he whispered, his voice filled with awe. "She is," I agreed, smiling as I looked down at our daughter. "I can't believe how lucky we are." Tom kissed the top of my head, his arms tightening around me. "We are lucky," he said, "but we've also fought for this. We've been through so much, and we've come out the other side stronger. I'm so proud of you, and I'm so proud of us." I leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his love surround me. "I'm proud of us too," I said softly, "and I'm ready to let go of the past, to focus on the future, on our family." Tom smiled, his eyes shining with love and pride. "I'm ready too. Whatever happens next, we'll face it together." As I looked at Grace, her tiny chest rising and falling with each peaceful breath, I knew that we had finally found our way through the darkness. The past would always be a part of us, but it no longer had the power to define us. We had chosen love, forgiveness, and hope, and that choice had brought us to this moment, this perfect, beautiful moment. And as I held Tom's hand and watched our daughter sleep, I knew that we were exactly where we were meant to be, together as a family, ready to face whatever the future might bring.